Hey everyone, thank you so much for hitting that play button. This is another episode of the Dave Bullis Podcast. Before we get to today's episode, I just want to say again, everything that can be found that we talk about in this episode, including a ton of free stuff that's always in the pre-show notes, can be found at davebullis.com. And again, I've put all of the stuff that we talk about in the episodes there, and again, tons of free stuff. And I just want to say, everyone, thank you for listening. This has been an excellent year, and let's make 2018 the best year ever. I know it sounds cliche to say, but you got to look at the positive side, right? So without further ado, let's just get to today's episode. On this episode, my guest plays Caesar in the comedy team Caesar and Otto. He hosts the Troma Now Podcast, and he also is a filmmaker himself. We also talk about he went to a college that no longer exists, which, again, as you know, I probably find really funny. Not the fact that he went there and it doesn't exist, but the fact that the college doesn't exist anymore. Because we talk about all that stuff. We talk about the worst on-set experiences, including when someone pulled a knife on a first AD, and we talk about getting to work with Troma, creating his own movies, finding an audience, tons more stuff. This is a really awesome interview about going out there and just doing it yourself and finding all the ways and different connections, and you never know what's going to happen. This is episode 198 with guest Dave Campfield.
You're listening to the Dave Bullis Podcast.
Actually, we got two Daves right here. It's going to become like that Cheech and Chong sketch.
Yeah.
Hey, Dave's not here, man. No, it's me, Dave, your guest. Dave. So, yes. Happy New Year.
Yeah, same to you, buddy. Is it snowing where you are, by the way?
I haven't looked out the window today. I'm not going to lie to you.
Oh.
I'm a bit of a shut-in.
Hey, same here, man. I just kind of look at my window from time to time, being like, oh, that's what it's doing outside. Okay. Actually, I have a huge window right in front of me, but you can't see it because we're on a podcast. But I swear it's there.
We can swear a lot of things are there. That's the beauty of podcasting. I'm talking to you from the shuttle Tiderian in the outer space, and welcome to the podcast today.
Yeah, it's great, man. I mean, I could just make up anything too. It's great. It's my supermodel wife is actually going in the kitchen right now making me some lunch, so it's great.
You have a supermodel wife? I do too.
It's great, man. It's great. Oh, it's a small world. Both named Dave. Both have supermodel wives. It's great, man. And
both host podcasts.
Yeah, and both. Oh my God. Well, we should just make a new show called Dave and Dave, and every week we just come on and just whatever stream of consciousness, any lie, any whatever comes off the top of our head, no one would know the truth either way, and they can kind of like figure out, what are they lying about? What's the truth?
This is very psychedelic. Let's get back to reality for a second here.
So Dave, I wanted to have you on the podcast because we actually met through the magic of Twitter, and you host your own podcast. You're a filmmaker. And hey, you know what? You have an awesome first name, so I figured, why not, have you on? We could talk about all this good stuff. We've been kind of, missing each other, so to speak, because I know we try to make our schedules sync. But you're on now, so that's why I wanted to have you on. Also because we both watch a lot of Troma movies. We both know Lloyd Kaufman. He's actually been on the show as well, and it's just again, small world. So. Just to get started, Dave, I wanted to ask, about your whole career and how you got started in the film industry. And also something really cool you do, too, is, Dave, you do what I've been starting to move this podcast to do, and that is you actually make movies at the same time do the podcast. You know what I mean? Like, you're actually out there doing stuff at the same time. I actually haven't made anything since I started this podcast, which is crazy. But and you're episode 198, so it's kind of crazy, man. So I wanted just to get started at the beginning, and that is, when you finally started making your own films. So just to start us at the beginning, did you go to film school?
I went to a college that doesn't exist anymore. I went to the College of Santa Fe in New Mexico, and I went there because it was the only film college in the United States, the only college in the United States that had a film studio on campus. So basically they took their gym and they renovated it, and they shot part of City Slickers there and other big films. So like when you go into this massive facility, and in New Mexico where this was, all of the houses and all of the architecture of the building is to code, and everything looks like an Adobe building. So yeah, I had this visual land of imagination between like the amber tones of the sand of the there was no grass there. It was like go to school on Tatooine in Star Wars. And the film college was the renovated gym. I mean, the film studio was the renovated gym, and you could see, and I'm being pointed to where they shot City Slickers. This is where they shot a nighttime fire scene indoors. Like it was a lot of the exteriors at night were actually shot inside. Like they were able to transform it into a grand vista, a grand landscape, and I could see on the ground too where they shot City Slickers that the basketball court still existed. The chalk marks from the basketball court were still there, but the appeal of going there was really just to be able to witness filmmaking firsthand. And I was in school with people who went off to be pretty successful, like Rockman Dunbar was a classmate of mine, and now you can see him in a lot of things from Prison Break to he was in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. He's one of those guys you've seen many, many times, but back then we were both just kids and trying to find our way. And I think college tends to be more about the experience you get working on film sets and meeting other people, film college, than it is necessarily even some of the stuff that you learn in the classroom, because that you can learn hands-on. And so that's where I got started. I met a good group of friends that I continue to collaborate with over the years and stay in touch with. And my roommate and I were working on a production. We're trying to get a production off the ground, and he secured two meetings, one with New Line Cinema, one with Universal. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. We're both 21 years old, and we got a meeting with these two major studios. So things are looking good. The future is looking bright. So bright, I had to wear shades. And so we got the Universal meeting, and I realized there was nothing to lose, because right up front they told us, look, fellas, we're having this meeting, but to tell you the truth, we're not going to take your work, but we're interested in meeting you. I'm like, all right, well, that takes the pressure off, because whatever, we have no background, but we make our best pitch, and it was a good meeting, and at the end of which we realized we weren't going to get anything out of it, maybe other than a contact. When we went to New Line, that's when the pressure was on, because there was a somewhat, albeit tiny, chance that they could look at the script and hire us to make it. And we got prepped by like an entertainment lawyer that was a friend of a friend, and they were giving us all the pointers that you have to say in your big production meeting. And he was telling us, when you guys go in, what they want to hear is that you're young, you're from the streets, you've got a story to tell, and you've got a dark coming of age comedy, and liken it to stuff they like from the past, like Grosse Point Blank or Heathers, stuff like that. Just tell them that's the language they speak. So we go into the New Line Cinema meeting with Matt Alvarez, and so, fellas, tell us what you got. I said, hey, well, Matt, we're young, we're from the streets, we're telling a story from the heart, a dark comedy, sort of like like a MP Grosse Point Blank or like a Heathers. And there's a pause as he's sitting looking at us from across the table, and he says to us, I have to say this is all very intriguing. So, and that began at age 21, like a year-long relationship with New Line Cinema, in which it was the absolute carrot being dangled in front of the rabbit and being just out of reach, because it went on. Like I would do little changes for them, and Matt would respond, and I would do another change, and take a few months for him to respond again. And they were clearly in touch, but I saw the writing on the wall. I felt like they were intrigued enough to keep me on the leash, but not intrigued enough to make the thing happen. And Matt went off to wound up producing all the Ice Cube movies, and I decided that I was going to try to, not become one of those people that get into that limbo of just waiting for that big opportunity to happen. You just had to make it happen on your own. So I began production on on my own film called Under Surveillance, later retitled Dark Chamber. And my attitude going into it is I've seen a lot of indie film, like straight to DVD movies, and they tend to fit a certain pattern. And the kind of emphasis was on the murder, mayhem, destruction, and following the paint by numbers plot. There's nothing against them, but that's what they do. Like when you go into some of these movies, it's sort of like, okay, the Friday the 13th homage number 2000. And I really wanted to do something different. I wanted to make it character based. I wanted to make it different. I wanted to surprise you, maybe more of a mystery thriller with some horror in there. And that was my attitude going into it. And after like 5 years I spent 5 years on this. And the things went wrong. There's documentaries online. If you type in, the release title was Dark Chamber. If you type in Making of Dark Chamber, you will see everything that could go wrong in 5 years. Because it usually does. When you're making a film, it's amazing how many things could go wrong. Especially you just don't have, because you're always cutting corners. You're always compromising. Things are always, money is not on your side. So you're constantly working around issues. And so I spent that time making this. And I was so happy that I made a film that, as I see, broke the conventions of the genre. And I'm proud of my little young self. And like, I go to the studios and like, here. And then their response is, we wanted something that was more familiar. I'm like, oh, son of a bitch. I thought like so all of those times when I'm looking at these movies is because they're encouraged to be familiar, and they're encouraged to follow the same things, and character matters less than does hitting certain beats of gore and other marketable elements. And I didn't really make that kind of film, but a couple companies said we're interested. And the one I went with was Camp Motion Pictures / Shakarama. And he told me right off the bat, I like this, but to get it into the marketplace, we're going to have to sell it as a horror. And at that point, all right, do what you have to do. And got into Netflix, and people were expecting Saw when they saw a cover with a pentagram carved into the back of the actress. There was no woman in the movie who got the pentagram carved in her back. They made the film look so gory, and that was simply what they felt was going to make it viable in the marketplace, and at the same time, it sort of changed the expectations of the audience. But if I had this perfectly marketed as a film with the proper title, like if it was called Under Surveillance and it had a cover that thoroughly represented the film, maybe 10 people would have seen it. So that's that's the trade-off, I guess. If you have a film that doesn't have big stars and it doesn't have a content that looks like a standard horror, people lose interest, and why see that when Hollywood's presenting the bigger budget equivalent to that same thing with more production values and more polish. You live, you learn, and that was a very educational experience. And from there, I began doing my comedy horrors because I want to be different in the marketplace, and I also want to tell stories that I miss. The kind of story and the Cesar Renato franchise, we started off with Summer Camp Massacre, Deadly Xmas, and Paranormal Halloween. They're comedy horror satires, where you lampoon the genre. And I hadn't seen like these real comedy horrors other than, the scary movies, but something more akin to Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein and those crossover movies where you have two doofy comedy characters and they're in the middle of a horror film, a genre they have no right being in, but somehow when they are in it, it's a lot of fun. And that has sort of been the path I've had. And more recently, I got into the Troma Now podcast, which was simply Lloyd appeared in one of the Caesar and Otto films. And I saw him at a convention. And I said, Lloyd, do you have a podcast? You know, he knows me, even though at first he was like, who are you? I said, I'm Dave. I directed you. You remember? Oh, God, Dave, I'm sorry. And he said, there's nobody we want to do one, but there's nobody doing it. And I said, I want to do one. I really want to do your podcast. I think I could, we can have some fun. And he said, yeah, talk to Levi. And he gave me like some contacts, and then we wound up making this thing happen. Basically they give me a little bit of notes before each episode, and then I send them the final product. They approve it and they put it up. And I've never yet denied an episode I've done. Meaning, it could be like, hey, we don't like this. Because I tease Troma a lot in the podcast, and they're always game with whatever, and that they've been a wonderful company to collaborate with. Just because of the freedom that they give you. And coming next year, I'm hoping it sounds like Lloyd's going to be the first guest of the new year, and possibly a 2-part episode. So we will see. About time we got him on there. It's his podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say it's kind of like, where the hell is he? Like, it's kind of like,
there's a fun board game. Where's Lloyd?
Yeah.
He's wearing the striped shirt and the glasses over in the corner in the adult bookstore. So. He's set to come on, and I haven't actively been making films since I've done the podcast. And as a matter of fact, I had another show that I was hosting, and I had to go on hiatus while I made the film, while I made my last feature. So it is definitely difficult to juggle podcasting and filmmaking. It is, because like if you're filmmaking and you're wearing a lot of hats, it tends to become your life, for that period of 5 months, 6 months, or a year.
Yeah, it's so true, and just trying to get everyone's schedule to sync and all that good stuff. That's why I focus more on my writing. When I say I haven't made anything since I started this podcast, that means I haven't actually produced anything. You know what I mean? Other than just focusing on this and sort of trying to get some stuff off the ground. And just to make it, but next year I'm dead set. I was actually going to make something this year, and it just kept getting pushed back. Just because.
Well, you got a day.
Yeah, I know, right? I got a day to come up with this. I actually next year. I actually have already like put the groundwork in now, because I haven't made anything, like I haven't directed anything in a long time. Just because of, people who've listened to this podcast know I've talked about it ad nauseum, but basically. I want to start doing something next year and just getting back on the horse, so to speak, or getting back on the wagon or off the wagon or whichever wagon it is. But making sure I'm actually doing stuff. Now, Dave, I just want to actually backtrack just a second here, because you mentioned something that I really took note of, which is that the college you went to doesn't exist anymore. Did it just lose all its funding and it couldn't operate anymore?
No, apparently I did it. I went there and they're like, man, what close the doors on this place? And it was a small school. I was one of 1,000 students that went there. And I think some of these privately funded schools sometimes have a harder time staying afloat unless the tuition is egregious, and it was. And so I had been out of there 10 years when they had closed. And what's funny is like the college was military barracks at one point. So it was like World War II. It was rather big. Our mess hall, or what do you call it, our lunch, was originally like military barracks from the Second World War. I'm like, this is a hell of a place to go to school. So I think it actually just became another college. They just gave it a cosmetic gloss and turned into another school with less of an emphasis on film.
With this whole. I was talking about college and stuff like that. I remember when a couple years ago, Sweetbriar College in Maryland was going to close. And Mark Cuban actually said, see, this is the beginning of the start of the college apocalypse, where all these small colleges are going to close. And I think he's absolutely right. So I actually looked at all the college closings for like the past 20 years. And like the most I think I ever saw like on that line, I think was like 9 or 10. But like even the college I went to, I had an awful college experience, by the way, and I still don't understand, why I even went to college. But And I still, everyone tells you have to have that degree. And then
I went for 1 year, Dave. So that's my whole college experience. And the rest of the time, I left specifically to pursue this and do it on my own. So mine's not a traditional college experience. It's a very short one.
Well, see, but that's the smart idea, though, is go. Honestly, man, I've known people who've gone for a day. I've known people who've gone for a year or two, and then they said, look, this isn't for me. Like, I don't get it. Like, I struggled through, all the fluff bullshit classes and got out the end, got that degree, and then you find out it means absolutely nothing. So it's like, what was the point of all that? So, because if everyone has a bachelor's, then what does it actually mean? So it's almost like, and then now, anyways, I'm going to get off on the topic about higher ed. Anyway, so what happened? So with that, I've actually, so when you actually were going to pitch, and when they talked about, things like, hey, we want something familiar, I have a friend of mine who actually pitched a different way. And what he does is when he goes into business meetings, he just says a lot of business buzzwords, and it's worked out damn well for him.
Well, I'll tell you this much. Dave, are you still there? It sounded like there was a little blip.
No, I'm here.
Okay. So a number of years ago, I was in California when we were on the same pitch. And by the way, this was for a different movie, the film that I pitched to New Line. But when we were out in California, we got together with another friend who got $1 million. And he was saying that his whole method of securing this money is he would go into a meeting. He was a scam artist. Not that he didn't deserve the money, but like his methods were like what he's going to have his friend buzz him on the cell phone in the middle of the meeting and say that he has to take the call. It's from another investor. And he had all of these little methods planned that would make the investors think that he's more important than he is. And so sometimes there's tools of manipulation that are used, but I've never been that guy. I really would like to think of myself as on the level, realistic with who I am, what I'm capable of, and that's it. Not try to turn myself into something I'm not. And for a lot of people, that's how they get their money. If I feel like I couldn't do something terrific, then I don't deserve it. And, I continue with that philosophy in mind. And if it pays off, wonderful. And if it doesn't, whatever. I'm still the person that I am, and I'm still moving forward and making films. And even if something is like this is a great experience, just doing podcasts, making indie films is nice. And hopefully you get that opportunity. Like I was telling you before we started recording that I was interviewed for a History Channel hosting gig, and it was a program, and that was as a result of staying the course. I have a friend of mine who's done very well, and he says, I like what you do, and I want you to co-host a program with me. I want you to audition to co-host for an audition with me. For a show that I'm going to be hosting. Had I not been doing what I've been doing, that opportunity wouldn't come through. So a lot of times you have to stick to your gun if it's what you really believe in. Be willing to not do well, but learn along the way, and see where it all takes you. And as a matter of fact, that show did happen, and whereas I wasn't the co-host, I was involved with it, and I had to I was one of the reenactors or whatever. This is cool. This is all bigger than the stuff I've done, and that led to more opportunities. So that's why if you really believe in it, you got to stick to your guns.
Yeah, it's I find that, and as we talk about just going forward with the podcast and talk about, making movies at the same time, I find that you have to keep that momentum going. Because if you stop, it's way too easy just to lose sort of track of everything, or lose sight of everything. And then suddenly you're like, oh shit, didn't I want to do this by now? You know what I mean? And it's kind of, you got to keep on that as best as you possibly can.
Well, I've been working on one script called Awaken the Reaper for on and off for about 10 years. So and it started off as just a fairly generic horror film with a couple of cool twists maybe, and has evolved into something extremely personal. And I don't think I've ever done anything this personal. And that's what I've been working on really for the last year trying to get, like fairly full time, trying to get this off the ground and find the proper budget for it. Because these Caesar not a comedy movies I've done, they've done for, between $6,000 and $10,000. And I can't do this anymore. I can't do films. I mean, they're wonderful experiences for the most part, but I can't keep doing films for so little money where I'm getting criticized primarily because I don't have money. It's an incredibly insulting thing to be criticized for. I have to show what I'm more capable of on a bigger budget, because you have with a bigger budget, you just have higher production values. You have more tools to play with. You have a wider palette to paint from. And so what started off as this generic film just really became the story of me and the story, hopefully, of all of us, where we get to a lot in life. We get into a place where we feel stuck, and you feel like you can't move forward, and you feel like every day you're not moving forward, and you're regretful of the past and afraid of the future. And that's, I think, where a lot of us are. And I want to tell that story about sort of getting out of the way of your own fear within the context of a very thought out horror film. And if I can make this work the way that I'm imagining and hoping for, if I could touch people on a human level with this, it will make for a really unique horror experience, because it's rare that a horror touches you on a human level and feels real. And that's what I'm hoping for. And maybe in 2018, we'll really get to make this happen. We'll find out.
Yeah, money is always that magical thing. But I always, now I'm sort of working with the other way, where I'm trying to sort of build it up, where I build it up again as we talk about the past. I'm trying to build it up again to the point now where, when I do go to an investor or whatever, I actually have a body of work that's more recent, and I think that's an advantage you have. Again, here's your business term: unfair advantage. What's the unfair advantage? And I think that's yours. Is not only that you have the podcast, and also you have the body of work, and you could say, "Hey, look, I've made this for a few $1,000s. Imagine what I could do for 50. Imagine what I could do for 100, and everything would still be profitable."
Well, profitable is harder and harder to accomplish these days. You just do the best that you can. And I've aligned with Wild Eye Releasing has been a wonderful company for me, and I do a lot of work for them. They've released my last couple of movies. They just released my compilation pack. If you do the Holiday Horrors, the Holiday Horrors DVD, if you type that in, that's all of my Caesar and Otto comedy horror films, which they just re-released. And I've been able to work on other indie films and do a bunch of stuff for them. And I've gotten to a point where, my films make something back. They don't necessarily make their budget back, but it shows you how difficult in this day and age with so many movies being made, how challenging it is to make a profit. But it can be done. It can be done.
Yeah, and that's something too that I talked about too on this podcast with a ton of other guests, is that with so many movies being made, how do you stand out? How do you stand out in any which way, shape, or form, and how do you get your movies seen now? So that sort of becomes the new, how the distribution method and the marketing for that distribution method. Let's just say I decided to make a movie and I put it on YouTube for the hell of it. I make a movie this weekend. You and I make a movie, Dave. There's one day left in 2017, so let's make a movie. And you and I make a movie, and we decided just to throw it on YouTube. It's a short film. And you know what? We just say, let's just keyword the hell out of it. Let's just hope for, somebody discovers, let's just hope. No, I'm sorry. That's a bad word. Let's just use it as a plan of long tail keywords, and that, as the longer it's up there, the more chance it has of being discovered. And we just sort of use that method, and hopefully somebody stumbles upon it. Again, I keep saying hopefully. I don't like that word hope. I don't, you know what I mean? It sounds too much like blind faith. But you know what I'm saying? Like that's the way of distribution and marketing. And there's 1,000 other ways to do it. It's all about trying to get the movie seen.
Well, the most successful person that I worked with on YouTube was an actress named Lauren Francesca.
Oh yeah, I know her.
No, she had a little cameo in one of my films, and I was pretty friendly with her for a couple of years there. We did a lot. I wrote and directed and co-starred in a bunch of videos for her. But I found what I think the key to her success was that she understood YouTube better than better than anybody I know. Like, and she would show me science of it and keywords and this and that. So it's two things, do you have the content and do you know how to market yourself? And I made a film that should have gone, I think, gangbusters on YouTube, like, because it was sort of made for YouTube, and it did okay. Like, people really seemed to respond to it, but not that many people have really seen it overall, and it's because I don't understand YouTube that well. Look at Piggyzilla, Piggyzilla. Do you like Godzilla? Do you like guinea pigs? Piggyzilla. And it's like a bunch of 2-minute shorts, and they I thought it would be more of a hit on YouTube because it's sort of made for it. It's short, it's silly, it's got animals. So
I'm going to link that in the show notes, by the way, Dave. I actually just looked that up real quick. So I will link to that in the show notes, everybody, so we can all check out Piggyzilla. But like I understand what you mean about like stuff like that, because I actually, as I've gotten more into YouTube, I actually have a friend of mine who runs one of the top YouTube channels. Not like it's like the top 1 percentile, and unfortunately, he doesn't do much with it anymore. And I've always said, like, give it to somebody who could actually use it. And he just won't give it up. I mean, it just kind of sits there rotting away, which is
how often does he post videos?
Not very often at all, and by that I mean like probably once every 6 months at most. And I mean, like, honestly, I've had him on the podcast, and we actually talked about that, and it's kind of like this where he wants to. He wants to make content for it, but he wants to make a certain kind of content, and it takes time to make that content, and then it's everything sort of keeps going into the back burner. So it's one of those situations. And I keep telling him, I said, you could be making a pretty good amount of money every month from this thing if it was just constantly being your monster was.
Of course. There are people who make livings off of YouTube and make pretty good livings off YouTube, and that's, like, to me, unfathomable, but it can be done. So by all means, to tell you the truth, the advantage of doing the Troma Now podcast instead of the Dave Campfield podcast is that I come out on their channel and they already have a built-in fan base, and I know their content and I like them personally. So, teaming with somebody who's already established themselves and giving them product that they like is always a win-win.
Yeah. Yeah, and also too, when you do the Troma Now podcast, it's it's branding, and honestly, I that's so important because people know what Troma is. Maybe I would go back and I'd change the name of this podcast because like guys like Alex Ferrari who have the Indie Film Hustle podcast, Indie Film Hustle just kind of rolls off the tongue, and you kind of can envision what it is. You hear my name, you hear this podcast, you're like, what the hell? Who the hell is Dave Bullis? And then two, I don't even care who he is. So
it's the reverse. It's almost like that guy just made. Once you've done a podcast with a brand name, then you've got your own name. Because what would Lloyd be without Troma? Troma came, and then people knew Lloyd. So it's sort of like you have to come up with the brand name, and then you get known for your brand name.
Where were you 3 years ago when I was doing this?
Call it Bullets. Your name sounds like bullets, right? You got to use bullets. Film man. Like it's just something bullet because you got a cool edge to your name. So.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, and we just have to. Well, too late now, Dave. You gotta stick to the Dave Bullis podcast, right? So
yeah, I know we're 100 and actually we're over 200 episodes now. You're 198, but we've actually recorded the other couple. So now we're.
I'm a prequel.
Yeah, you're actually So through the magic of podcasting, you're actually the prequel to the sequel, which hasn't been released yet.
Wow, we're shooting out a sequence here. I like it.
Yeah, just like a movie. We're shooting out a sequence. Oh man, it's just and for everyone listening, if you're going to start your own podcast, if I could just give you really quickly before we get to talking about Dave and all the stuff he's up to, I want to just say if you're going to start a podcast, here's my recommendations for right now. The name has to really be unique. The it has to roll off the tongue. But it also has to do with so people can, when they hear it, it envisions what they're going to be listening to. The format has to be, obviously around around an idea of what the core of this is going to be. And you can make it short, you can make it long, as long as it's always in tune with that idea. And I mean, there are some podcasts I listen to that are 5 minutes, and it's like that's exactly how long it should be. And there's podcasts that I've listened to that are, an hour, hour and a half, and that's exactly how long that should have been, because they're telling like a murder mystery. You know what I mean? Like there's story type podcasts which have gotten pretty popular on like My American Life and NPR and all that good stuff. And then you have the other stuff. So always, because I think the interview podcast, I think we've kind of reached like max interview podcast, even though this is an interview podcast. But like Mark Maron's WTF, Adam Carolla's, Joe Rogan's podcast. I think that the more you can stand out, the better it is. But I think the reason you stand out, Dave, is again you have that unique angle, again unfair advantage of going with Troma. And also, you sound like a radio host, like I said before in the pre-interview.
Thanks. Why, thank you, Dave. Maybe I should push it a little more and become the exaggerated radio host. But I was going to say that when you talk about Mark Maron, and a lot of these guys just got started on when it was beginning, when podcasts were really beginning, they got in then. If Mark Maron try to come out of nowhere right now, maybe he wouldn't have that luck. He probably wouldn't, to tell you the truth. So it has a lot to do with when he started. He sort of pioneered you could say, podcasting in general. So as one of the first, he thrived. So it's almost like we have to see where the next evolution in media is going to be and get in on the ground level, which is what a lot of these guys did. They saw where the industry was going, or at least took a gamble on it, and got in at the right time.
Yeah.
So
that's
now there's a million podcasts. So it's harder for us to stand out.
Yeah, very, very, very true, man. It is just getting in that ground floor, then just dominating the industry or just dominating that niche. When Maron started, it was just in its early days, and now he's up to like over 1,000 episodes. And the same thing with like Joe Rogan and Adam Carolla. And that's why when a new podcast comes out, they usually have a ton of marketing money behind it, like what some of these other podcasts that have done well are doing, is because they just have a ton of marketing, and they don't market the traditional way, because again that would be foolish. They market specifically on social media. They market it's all direct marketing. It's no more. It's like there's hardly any permission based marketing anymore, and it's all basically, you know what I mean. So I want
to tell you something that my friend Ethan Wiley, he's a filmmaker, has made a lot of fun films you might have seen before. He made the House movies 1 and 2. He made Children of the Corn 5. He's done a lot of things. And he told me the problem with these things is that it's almost like having a billboard in the jungle. It's like you're surrounded. No one will see it. No one will know it's there because there's so much around us. And it's hard in a world where 1 out of 10 people, I'm making a guess, so when people have podcasts, how do you get seen? I have another podcast that I do occasionally. I've done one episode called Production Hell, and that's all about the trials and tribulations of indie filmmaking, like really getting to the nightmare stories of what couldn't go wrong and what has gone wrong on film sets. I made one episode, and it's not even at 100 listens, because there's nothing, I don't promote it, but it's nothing, no buzzwords that people are tapping into. People aren't finding it. So, therefore I stick with the Troma Now podcast until people really get a sense of, my style and hopefully check out whatever else I do.
I like that, by the way, Production Hell. That is a really good idea for a podcast.
It's on SoundCloud. Find the one episode.
It's almost like, what would be a good podcast is something like that, where you have like two people who fell out during the filming of a film, like the director, producer, or the two directors or whatever, and you bring them on there and you almost use it as like a kind of like a film court where each guy gets to tell his side of the story. That would be interesting, man, because there's 1,001 things that I, what I mean, like on film sets where I've had people like friendships have ended on a film set. I've had people on this podcast where one has the audio, one has the video, studio. Even you know what I mean, stuff like that. That would actually be kind of interesting.
I have somebody I knew in college who pulled a knife on his production assistant or something. So things have gone down seriously wrong.
Why did he pull a knife on him or her?
I think it was her. To my understanding, there was a fight about, and probably maybe it was an assistant director. So one was the director, and the assistant director was probably saying that she's leaving. She doesn't think this makes sense. She doesn't want to do it anymore. And apparently this was bad. This is as bad as a film argument can go. So there are countless stories about all of the things that could go wrong. And also I have countless stories about things that could have gone right if things were just have happened a little bit differently. Like I'll tell you this story, and maybe I'll leave it at this. Years ago, I think when I was 19, and I dropped out of college and making my own film, and a friend of mine is doing boom mic on a little indie film in New Jersey, and he's telling me he's got my script and he's pitching it. He's showing it to a couple people on the set, and they responded to it. I'm like, okay, cool. And tells me about one actor. That sounds promising. I really think you'd be good in this role. But I'm talking to this other guy. He's not really big yet. And I'm like, okay, but he seems to like the script so far. He says, wow, this is dark. I'm like, okay, tell me, who is he? Rent this film. And he had me rent this film that he had a little cameo in, a little comedy from Universal, little role. And I'm like, I don't know if this guy's really right for anything in this movie. He's like there's a total disconnect. No, I don't worry about pursuing him. I don't think it's a good match. That actor's name was Ben Affleck. And I closed the door on Ben Affleck before he became Ben Affleck. And the film that they were shooting was Chasing Amy, another one that really defined him. And the film that I looked at from his was Mallrats. If you look at him in Mallrats, it's very particular. He's not at his best, and he's not what he became. He's fine, but there was no role for him. So, I mean, what's the truth? I mean, if I said, yeah, this guy's great, I mean, it probably would have fallen apart anyway, because he would have gotten too big and we would have lost touch. Like, it's the same thing that happened with my New Line Cinema experience. But still, to think Ben Affleck was reading my stuff and saying, this is cool, I like it, and before he became famous is pretty funny.
Yeah, that's that's a door. That's a hell of a door to close. It's just funny with Mallrats. I remember that Kevin Smith told a story about Mallrats when he showed it to Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino, and he said, what do you guys think? And they were like, "Ooh, I think you went a little too much." I mean, he said both of them just kind of looked dejected. And then when he made Chasing Amy, he said both of them like, "All right, now you found your mark again. Great, good job."
Yeah, once one is like true Kevin Smith, and the other one's sort of like Kevin Smith trying to appease the studio. Where you sort of lose your core, like you lose your uniqueness, your distinctness, and it's great that he got to tell you the truth. I think up the game, from Clerks was very raw and very true to Kevin's style and voice. And Mallrats was sort of, I guess, diluted, sort of like, hey guys, you like this? And then Chasing Amy is kind of like a more mature, not that mature, but more mature version of his voice. And you see, terrific evolution. And I met Kevin Smith. It was the funniest, it was the most bizarre circumstance, because I really so badly wanted him to see like one of my Cesar Rada films, because he could think, wow, this is akin to Jay and Silent Bob in their own way. And so I had been trying to get in touch with him. I tried emailing, nothing worked. And one day I'm on a flight to California to do some reshoots on Cesar Rada's Deadly Xmas. And I looked to my right, and son of a bitch, he's coming out of the airport terminal. He's going through bag. He's going through. He's putting his stuff on a conveyor belt. I see a hockey jersey, a beard, and a baseball cap on backward. I'm like, that's fucking Kevin Smith. So I'm like, what do I do? And I had my Summer Camp Massacre movie in my bag. And I heard him recently talk about Sleepaway Camp, like on a podcast, and he was in my film Summer Camp, spoof Sleepaway Camp. It's got the actors from Sleepaway Camp. My good friend Felissa Rose, she's in there. I'm like, okay. So I sashay over to him, and I said, "Could I pay you a compliment?" He's like, "Yeah, sure, man. I want you to know you're probably the best verbal storyteller I've ever heard in my life." And he's like, "Oh, thanks, man. Well, I'm no Gene Shepherd." And he says, "Because I always thought that verbal storytelling is my best gift because God knows my films ain't worth a shit." I'm like, oh my God, look at this modesty for a success story, a pure success story. And at one point, I say to him, you like that film Sleepaway Camp, right? Remember that 80s slasher film? He says, "Yeah, Sleepaway Camp, the girl with the face." And I said, I made a spoof of that film, and I used the same actress. He said, "No shit, man." I'm like, yeah, I have it in my bag. You want it?" "Sure, man." And I run up with my bag. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this is going so well. And I run up with my bag and I hand it to him. And it was just released and shrink wrap. And I said, if you ever have a chance to see it, just email me, let me know what you think. And so we gave it to him. A few weeks later, my friend tells me he hears on a podcast that he mentioned the whole interaction. And on the Smodcast, the episode called Cannabis, he's talking about like how he was in an airport and ran into a guy that was, because they were talking about Sleepaway Camp, and like he just retold the whole experience. So I'm like, wow, I don't think he ever saw the movie, because I later heard him say that people give him stuff all the time, and it goes into a pile of stuff he'll watch one day when he's sick. So it's somewhere maybe in the middle of that pile, and by that point, you're always growing as a filmmaker, so it'd be like looking at somebody's really early work. So that's and incidentally, that film Summer Camp, which you can see on YouTube, like it was put on YouTube legally through the first distributor, was the first movie of an actor named Trey Byers. I cast him like I like this guy. It was an Italian role, but this actor is African American. He's got a great personality. He's got a great presence. Liked him a lot. Now Trey stars on Empire. So I have this ability of like casting people in their first role, and they become famous, and then I never talk to them again. Because Peter Scanavino, my first film, Dark Chamber, he stars on Law and Order now. So my first two films, cast one of the stars of Law and Order and one of the stars of Empire, and I'm still a nobody.
Well, there you go. You find people who are going to become big. So that's your gift, Dave. So that way, I'm going to encourage every actor now just to shoot you their headshot and everything else, and then you can find out. No, I'm just kidding. But but seriously, that is cool though. You meet people before they become big, and you can't see it again because we're on a podcast. But I actually have a Kevin Smith a podcast figure. I actually saw it one day. It was like on sale, and I decided to get it. So it's actually him with the beard. It says "Puck You" on there, and he's got a microphone in his hand. And it's actually just sits in front of my desk here. It's one of my 3 figures in front of me. But it's just really, really cool that you got to meet him like that.
Yeah, I mean, of all, it was almost like I would say it's divine intervention, except for nothing came out of it. So, but he did mention it on the podcast. So it was a little gift from heaven, you could say. So was there anything else that you wanted to touch on regarding, because I know like if you really talk to somebody, it's a podcast that goes on forever and people don't have the patience for that. But was there anything that else you were interested in terms of what I was up to?
Just 2 things. I know we are running out of time, but just 2 things before we sort of say goodbye. Just creating Caesar and Otto and just making films that you do right now. So basically, you had to have a time frame, you had to have all this stuff in play. So, were a lot of these films, when you were starting out, did you self-finance like the first couple of Caesar and Ottos, and then you shot it, and then you just started shopping for a distributor? And I mean, now do you have like sort of like a set plan in place? Like they say, "Hey, Dave, are you making something else that we can just put out?"
The first Caesar and Otto film came about this way. So when Shakarama released Dark Chamber, Mike Rosso, the head of the company, asked if I had anything else that I was working on, and I said I had this film, Awaken the Reaper, and he said, "No, that sounds serious. I want a comedy horror." And I said, a thought occurred to me. I had made a $700 feature film called Caesar and Otto, and it was just about us 2 doofball, characters. And I was instantaneously imagined like an Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. What if I put them in a horror film? Okay. So, and then I was spitballing right off the top of my head. I said, Mike, what about Caesar and Otto in a horror film, maybe like a summer camp film? I know the Star Sleepaway Camp. Maybe I can talk her into this, and it's Caesar and Otto in a summer camp massacre, and he says, write it. I took 30 days. I wrote it, and they approved it. They gave me a little bit of money to make it. And then by the time that it was made, like I showed them a rough cut, we love this. And then by the time it was to release it, like there was the DVD implosion where everything they were selling was less and less, especially comedies. And by the time they were releasing it, it's like, Dave, the whole market's falling apart. They had released a few comedies back to back, and they all just lost money. He says, so I don't know really what we're going to do with this. We might shelve it for now and put it on a compilation DVD. I'm like, here's your money back. I'm going to find another home. And and that's what we did. I found another home for it. It did better than Shakarama would have anticipated. And then from that distributor, I went to another one. We did in Deadly Xmas, which was, financed between a friend of mine and I. And then lastly, with Paranormal Halloween, it was mostly funded through Indiegogo. At that point, there had been enough traction from the previous films to give the audience an idea of what they were going to get. And I offered a lot of perks that I think they enjoyed, and that helped as well.
Yeah, and so that's kind of, again, like you sort of, as I was touching on at the beginning of this podcast, you have that it's almost like a method or plan in place where, you can do the podcast, you get your name out there still, and then you're still doing the films. And I think that's important now, is you have to have almost like a pre-existing fan base, almost, you know what I mean, with a lot of this stuff now, because if you just go out cold, it's a lot harder to not only make people aware of it, but also just to sort of get the attention of the right people.
Well, my fan base is small but intense. I mean, I could rattle them off on two hands, so, like name by name. But it's, it's helpful. It's very helpful that they're out there to, to champion this stuff, and without them, I probably wouldn't be able to do any of this, really.
Yeah. It's like they say, 1,000 true fans. That's all you need.
Well, it's a lot less than that. Maybe one day 1,000 would be good.
So, Dave, just in closing, I know we've been talking for about 50 minutes now, but just in closing, is there anything we didn't get a chance to discuss, or anything that you want to say right now, just to put a period at the end of this whole conversation?
Yeah, follow me on Twitter. I'm going to be doing an interview with Lloyd coming up. So if you have a question you would like me to ask Lloyd, at me, and I'll hopefully bring it up. And just you can see my work at IMDb, get an idea of what I worked on. If you have any questions, anybody can hit me up on Facebook. I'm always receptive to answering questions and all of that.
And I will link to all of that in the show notes, everybody. Everything that Dave and I talked about at DaveBullis.com. Twitter, it's at Dave_Bullis. The podcast is at DB Podcast. David Campfield, I want to say thank you so much for coming on, man.
One last thing. You called me David Campfield.
Oh, wait, did I say David? Man.
No, that's not a problem. But get this. It's an uncommon name, clearly. David Campfield, Dave Campfield. These are not everyday names, not John Smith. There's another David Campfield out there who wants to be an actor. Son of a bitch. Both of us want to be actors. Both of us are actors. He was in movies. I was in movies, and it's very confusing. So if you IMDb David Campfield, you get him. You IMDb Dave Campfield, you get me. And when it comes to unions, it gets even more confusing. All right, you can take David. I can take Dave. So there's another David Campfield out there, and he's an actor of all things. I can't believe it. So, yeah, and we're friends with each other.
Oh, that's good, because there's another Dave Bullis out there, and he actually has a Twitter, Dave Bullis, because my Twitter's at Dave_Bullis. So I said to him one day, I said, hi, I'm Dave, and I said, listen, I think it'd be better for you if we just kind of like swap Twitter names. And I said, if there's something I could do to help you out, I said, because people were killing him. They were tweeting him all the time. And finally, he finally responded back, like, I'm not that Dave Bullis, this guy, blah, blah, blah. And finally, he blocked me one day. And I said, like, I tried to, help you out here, man. Like, he had, 20 followers. Now he doesn't even use Twitter anymore. And, but yeah, he ended up blocking me, all because he got angry. People were tweeting at him, looking for me.
Well, that's an impractical response. People, there's at least 1% of the population that's completely unreasonable. So he's one of those. So wonderful talking to you, fellow Dave, and podcasting.
Yeah, man, this has been a blast.
Hopefully we'll be speaking again.
I'm sure we will, man. Trust me. I'm sure our paths will cross at some point.
Wonderful. Where are you from, by the way? What state?
I'm in Philadelphia, which is Pennsylvania.
Well, not too far. I just edited a commercial for the Philadelphia Pet Expo. So coming up, you'll be able to see dogs and cats living together in mass hysteria. So actually, no, seriously, I do some part-time editing on the side, and editing the Philadelphia Pet Expo is one of my gigs. That's the fun thing about being a freelancer.
Where are you in Jersey?
No, I'm on Long Island.
Oh, Long Island. Okay, cool. So it is not snowing where you are, probably. So,
no, you can let me know how it is. Yeah. Oh, how it's snowing? No, I just, as I said, I'm not kidding when I said I haven't looked out the window today.
Oh, it's no problem. It's actually just stopped. Actually, during this podcast, the snow has actually stopped. It's not doing anything anymore. So
probably coming my way.
But I've already been outside many times already just to push it all out of the way. So
okay.
I'm gonna go do that now. So, anyways, just to get the rest of it out of here. So, Dave, again, it's been a blast, and thanks again for coming on. And yeah, well, I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Yeah, let's have a good 2018.
Yes, let's do it, man.
All right, great talking to you.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.